So, brief introductions. Again, I'm Diane Hull, and I work on the team that works with graduate students and postdocs. For those of you who have never made an appointment with Career Services, we are really happy to meet with any of you to talk about informational interviewing, either to prepare, how to approach it, how to follow up afterward. So feel free to schedule an appointment with us on Handshake. We're happy to have further conversations about networking. Well, what we're going to be talking a little bit about today are informational interview basics. How are we going to use some online tools to find people to connect with, and what online tools are probably the most useful for you? How to reach out effectively. I think one of the things we're actually going to talk about is what are you going to say in this email that you're going to send to people trying to reach out to them. I think that's something that really challenges people a lot. How are you going to prepare? What's the approach that you're going to take for informational interviews? What goes into a good conversation? What do you need to be thinking about to make this networking conversation helpful for you? How are you going to follow up, and how are you going to maintain the relationship with the people that you are having conversations with? Because what you don't want to do is have a great conversation and then it doesn't go anywhere in the future. So the first thing that I want to talk a little bit about is what is an informational interview, right? So it's really a form of networking in terms of you're not actually interviewing for a specific job, right? And you're not interviewing someone like you're a journalist and you're conducting an interview, but this is a form of networking. It's a one-on-one conversation, although not always one-on-one, with professionals to gather information about career-related topics that are interesting to you. Maybe you're trying to learn about employers, maybe you're trying to learn about roles you're interested in. You can really conduct an informational interview with anyone that's willing to talk to you, anyone who works in a career that's interesting to you, anyone who works at an organization that you'd like to learn a little bit about. Where can you conduct informational interviews? Certainly online. If we've learned nothing over the last 2 years, is that we definitely can conduct a lot of these interactions online. But now that things are reopening and people are feeling more comfortable getting out and about, certainly possible to have a conversation with someone in their office, to have a conversation with someone in a coffee shop. All of these are reasonable ways to approach. When do you want to conduct informational interviews? It's really any time during your graduate studies. And one of the things that I really hope everyone takes home today is I think a lot of people think about informational interviewing when they're starting to think about a job, right? Which is natural, of course. But I do think that it can be really helpful to think a little bit about conducting informational interviews when you're not looking for a job, when you're trying to collect information. That actually can be less pressure and a great time to start collecting information. And it really can, so it can be any time during your graduate studies. If some of you just started in the fall a PhD program and you're going to be here for a few more years, now is a perfect time to conduct an informational interview. But it's also not too late if you're graduating in May. And you really want it to be convenient for the professional. And then how? You can certainly do phone, video, in person, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes by email, although I do think the interaction will probably be more productive if you have an interaction in person in some way, shape, or form. And when I say in person, I include online. So why are informational interviews important? So first off, to gather information about career fields that interest you, right? So what I often say to students is I say, look, something can seem really interesting on the outside, but then maybe once you learn a little bit more, it becomes less interesting. Sometimes something doesn't seem that interesting to you, but then you learn a little bit more about it and it becomes more interesting. So you're just gathering information. It can be very helpful to understand the skills and experiences that are needed for certain roles, and to also evaluate your own skills and experiences. So if you start to identify that there's a career field that's really interesting to you, but you might start to learn, oh, I'm missing some skills that are really important in that role. How can you gain those skills while you're a graduate student at Penn? Are there things that you could be doing in order to build the skills that might be helpful for you? Learning the language, learning the lingo, so to speak, vocabulary used in a particular field. Penn is a place that certainly I'm sure all of us have learned over time is very, very full of acronyms, right? That mean a lot to the people inside, but outside maybe don't mean as much to someone outside. And so the more that you have conversations with people that work in a field that's interesting to you, the more you can start to speak the same way and use the same language. This can be really helpful when you're putting together a resume, when you're putting together a cover letter. If you have a sense of kind of the phrases and words that are used in that field, that can really help you. It can really help you to develop your own professional narrative. So I think for anyone who's in graduate school, whether you have a particular career field in mind that you're focused on, you need to sort of have a way to sort of tell your story a little bit. In terms of what made you want to go to graduate school, why are you studying what you're studying, what are some of the goals that you have. And the more that you ask those types of questions of other people, and the more that you hear them, more that you hear them talk about their own professional narrative, it can help you to develop yours. Certainly to expand your professional connections, most ideal time to do networking is not when you're actually looking for a job. And so the idea is that you really want to be developing connections in advance of actually needing them, but then down the road, you now already have some professional connections that can be helpful. And in that way, it can expose you to potential professional opportunities. You never really want to approach networking with the idea that you're going into it hoping that someone's going to submit your resume or make a referral to you. But that can happen down the line. But you really just could be opened up to new professional opportunities that maybe you hadn't thought of before. So where can you find people to conduct informational interviews with? So I always like to tell students it's sort of like a concentric set of circles, right? And so in the middle is you're the sun. And then the next level are the lowest hanging fruit, people that you already know, right? So these are people that you've taken classes with, that you've worked with in previous jobs and internships, faculty, family friends. These are people that you actually know. That's the easiest place to go ask people for these networking conversations. And one of the exciting things I think about being a graduate student at Penn is that people come to Penn with all kinds of different kinds of backgrounds. And you may find people in your program, in your classes, in your labs, who have some sort of interesting experience that they've done in the past, right? Maybe they worked professionally, maybe they had another graduate degree. And so there can really be a lot of people just really sitting in close proximity to you that you can start with. That's the easiest place to get started. But I really think that the more powerful people that can help you over time are not those people as close to you, but they're 1 or 2 steps removed. And so other places that you can sort of think about finding people to conduct informational interviews with: conferences, symposiums, panel discussions, lots of events at Penn. If you get involved with different kinds of student groups at Penn, if you're involved with GAPSA at the Grad Center, I often think that one of the things I recommend to a lot of graduate students is join some student clubs that maybe have nothing to do with your professional interests, right? If you have a particular interest in dance or music or art, see if there's student groups that you can join with that, because you could definitely meet people who are studying something completely different from what you're here studying at Penn, but then they definitely people that you would be able to connect with for networking. And tapping into the Penn alumni network and your other networks. Another benefit of being a graduate student at Penn is that you all have an undergraduate degree from another institution. And that can be another place that you could absolutely tap into for networking. So a couple of the places that we think that you can find people to connect with, LinkedIn is going to be one of them. For those of you that are not on LinkedIn, I highly recommend that you put that at the top of the list of things that you can be doing in terms of getting ready to think about your next professional steps. LinkedIn can be a great place for you to find people, but it can also be a great place to be found. And so again, we have another workshop coming up later today at 11:30 about kind of the nuts and bolts of finding people on LinkedIn. If we have a little time at the end, I'm happy to do a quick tour on that as well. All of you as Penn students have access to MyPenn. So MyPenn is the Penn alumni database. If you've been at Penn for a little while, you might have known it in a former life as QuakerNet. It's basically just a new and improved version of that. What's nice about MyPen is that it includes alumni from across the university. So if you are a master's student in LPS, you'll still have access to alumni in the med school. If you're in the Master in Law program, you'll have access to people in Wharton. So it really gives you access to all Penn alumni, and you can search for people in a variety of ways. And you can certainly indicate alumni can indicate whether they're open to networking and mentoring. So this is a really great way to find Penn alumni. It's really pretty self-explanatory to use. But again, you can make an individual appointment, or we're going to be talking about this a little bit later today. So one of the things that I think stymies a lot of people is, well, how do I find their actual contact information, right? So if we go back to LinkedIn, LinkedIn is a fabulous place to find people, but most people don't include any contact information in their LinkedIn profile. You can message people through LinkedIn, but I personally don't think, first of all, unless you have premium LinkedIn, which I don't advocate that you pay for, you are limited in the number of people that you can reach out to. And I just don't know how many people actually check their LinkedIn messages. So a great place that you can find, so really what you want to do is use multiple places to find people and then find their contact information. MyPen can be a great place to find someone's email address, right? Because it will provide contact information for you. Another great tool that Career Services has that is helpful in finding contact information is Career Shift. And so this is Career Shift. Again, we might be able to do a quick tour of Career Shift if we have a little bit of time at the end. But Career Shift has two components to it. One is they have what they call the hidden job markets. They have job market information about jobs that are posted. The other thing that you can do is you can go into contacts and you can search for an employer. If you already have someone's name, it can be really easy to find them. And it will provide you actual contact information of their email address. Some employers have really easy to guess email addresses, but other larger organizations, you know, if there's someone's name and then a number at the end, it can be a little bit harder to guess. I was helping a student last week that was looking for people at a particular organization that was very large. And, you know, because of the number at the end of the email, it would have been very hard to guess. So this can be a great place to take a look. Right, and Joseph's mentioning not even Penn has a standardized format. So if you enter Penn with a first name and a last name that fits their character content, it can be very easy to guess. And if no one before you has ever had the same name. Someone was asking in the chat, where can you find the recording file? We will have those up on our YouTube channel. And at the end, I'm going to show you a little bit about where you can subscribe to our YouTube channel to take a look at this. Okay, so what do I think is the hardest part about informational interviews? Sending the email to ask, right? I just spoke to a student yesterday who said, you know, I had this list, I had all these people, and then I sat on my phone and I did not know what to say to them. So we're going to talk a little bit about what I think might be helpful in thinking a little bit about how you can draft these emails. Oh, and I'll answer this question quickly. Is the contact information in MyPen and Career Shift different, or is it in two places to find the same info? And Joseph's saying that MyPen includes professional and personal emails, whereas Career Shift is just going to be pulling off of an employer email. Reaching out to request an informational interview. So it's going to be an email that you're going to send, and it's going to be brief, right? And these are the sorts of things that you're going to want to make clear in your note. Who you are, right? What your name is, what you're in school studying, why you're reaching out to that person specifically. Is it the organization that they work with? Is it that they came from your same PhD program and you're trying to learn a little bit more about what people do after they graduate? What you have in common. Again, we're assuming that you're networking with people from Penn. So that's the thing that you're going to talk about that you have in common. But if it could be another way, you're going to want to mention that. And what your ask is. Usually what I say to people is in terms of what your ask is that you can say something as informal as, you do something that's very interesting to me. I'm in this program at Penn, trying to, make some next steps in my career. And I'm hoping that you might have 15 or 20 minutes for me to pick your brain and ask you some questions about what it is you do, learn a little bit more about what it is you do. So it's a defined ask. Expressing your gratitude, right, in advance, thanking them for taking the time to possibly consider this request. You may not get a response immediately, and you may not get a response at all, but that's okay, right? We don't really know why people don't follow up. Is it because you had the wrong email address and they just don't check that email address anymore? Is it because they don't have time and they're not interested? Did they see your email and forget? We don't really know. Generally speaking, I will say when I work with students who are reaching out to alumni for informational interviews, they are often genuinely surprised how many people will actually get back to them. It won't be everyone, but it will be some. You are certainly free to follow up with them again if you didn't get a bounce back, and so you feel like perhaps you did get the right email address. If you don't hear back after a follow-up, you could certainly give it a little bit more time and follow up again. Generally, I feel like after 3 tries, you want to move on. But so these are the things you want to think about in following up. Let's assume that you've had some sort of contact with people. You've gotten a positive response. And so now you want to prepare. So the first thing that you want to really do is do a pretty good Google search on them, right? Get a good sense from LinkedIn, from whatever else you can find on Google. It's really important to know what they're doing right now, but it's important to know maybe what they did to get there. Figuring out where they went to undergraduate degree, where they got their graduate degree. Of course, any connections to Penn and undergraduate degree. Second degree connections are also really helpful. I'll give you a great example of someone who just personally reached out to me. I have a friend who was hiring a graphic design firm to do some work for her. And she and I are social friends, although we have some professional contacts in mind. She looked up this person that she was interviewing to do the graphic design work on LinkedIn, noticed that she and I were connected, sent me a text and said, hey, I'm wondering, can you tell me anything about Tori? I know you guys are on LinkedIn, but do you actually know each other? And it turns out we actually know each other really well. And I was able to give a really good recommendation. So that's a second degree connection that was really helpful. Leadership and volunteer interest, lots of people, you may find that they are a runner and you're also a runner. And you don't necessarily have to bring these types of things up when you're having an interaction with someone for informational interviewing, but it can be helpful to sort of guide the direction that you might go with questions and what sorts of comments you might have. You always want to confirm the time, date, and location, logistics of your conversation, maybe a day ahead. And you also want to send a reminder if the informational interview was arranged more than a week ago. So if you talk to someone and they say, yes, I'd love to meet with you in 2 weeks, you confirm some time, maybe the day before, you just say, I'm really looking forward to speaking with you tomorrow. Thanks for taking the time, just so people don't forget. Tips for the conversation. Be human, ask them how they're doing. So what I mean by that is that, you can often go into an informational interviewing situation feeling a little bit nervous, right? And feeling a little bit like you just want to get down to business. You don't want to take too much of their time. You really have some things you'd like to learn. But I do think it's nice to kind of have a casual, hey, how are you? Maybe last week was a holiday and you ask them a little bit about that. Just sort of check in with people and ask them how they're doing. Start off by really thanking them for their time and explain why you're excited to speak to them. Listen really actively. This is something that's pretty important in the virtual world in terms of, if you're going to be taking notes, which I think is fine, tell them that. Say, oh, by the way, I may be jotting some things down. So I apologize for my lack of eye contact. I'm just really trying to, gather lots of information. But, certainly don't write the whole time. Look up, smile, nod your head when you agree with something. Share appropriately, right? So talk a little bit about your motivations, interests, experience, and skills, and convey your interest in their career path. Ask good questions. And when we say share appropriately, meaning, you don't have to tell them everything that you're interested in. If you're having a conversation with someone that you're sort of like, well, I'm not really sure this is what I want to do, but, you don't have to necessarily tell them that you're leaning in another direction. Asking good questions, really questions that are unique to them. So show that you've done your research and focus on their experience. And so I think, as an example, if you're talking to someone who graduated from Penn 5 years ago, and you can see on LinkedIn what they've done over the last 5 years, you wouldn't say, well, what have you been doing since Penn, right? Because that's a pretty vague question, but you might say, oh, I see that when you first graduated from Penn, you worked at this place and now you've moved to your current position. Can you tell me a little bit about that transition? That's very specific to them. Again, open-ended, so not yes or no questions, really trying to generate a conversation. And you can prepare ahead of time, right? It's fine to write the questions down so that you don't forget. And you can even say, oh, hold on for 1 second. Let me refer to my list of questions that I have. So tips for a good conversation. Have a clear idea of how the professional can help you. But helping at this point does not include asking for a job or asking for a referral. The main way that you're asking people to help you at this point is sharing information. That's absolutely the best thing that you can be doing, is getting them to share information. You do hope that maybe down the line, there is an opportunity for them to provide a referral to you, for them to maybe clue you into a job, but now is not the time to be doing this. You're simply collecting information. The only help you're asking them is to answer some questions for you. In an ideal world, again, this comes back to why it's really important to do networking kind of throughout your time at Penn, as opposed to waiting until you're really ready to look for a job. In an ideal world, you would do some networking, right, with people that did things that were interesting to you. You kind of keep that conversation going over the next couple of weeks. And then maybe a few weeks later, you see a job pop up at their organization. Now you can shoot them an email and say, do you know anything about this particular position, right? Because you already know them. The most important thing that I think people can do at the end of an informational interview is ask for recommendations and other connections. So I think it can be really powerful to say to someone, hey, this was so helpful. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. Can you share with me, are there any other people in your network that you think might be interested in also speaking to me? And, would you be willing to connect us? I've spoken to so many students over the years who had a connection with someone, they were led to someone else, and that led to an opportunity. Tips for the virtual setting: minimize distractions, which just means if you can avoid having your cat walk across the screen. As much as I enjoy pets on Zoom calls, it will reduce your anxiety, and it just keeps things professional. Dressing professionally does not mean wearing a suit. It just means not wearing your pajamas. And maintaining eye contact when you're not writing things down, I think, is helpful. After the informational interview is over, you really want to jot down notes. If you can keep the conversation going without writing a lot of things down while you're talking to someone, that's okay. But it's okay to jot some notes down too. I highly recommend that you create a spreadsheet to keep track of not only who you're talking to and what you're talking to about, what you're speaking to them about, but you also might want to think about writing down who you're reaching out to, when you're sending people emails, remembering stories, advice, and personal details. As an example, if someone says, oh, my spouse and I are expecting a baby in 3 weeks, the next time you interact with them, you might say, oh, how's the baby? That would be a great thing to remember, but something that you might forget otherwise. Send a thank you note via email for sure within 24 hours, and follow up on anything is needed. If someone made an introduction for you, let them know how that goes as well. If you are not connected with this person on LinkedIn, send them a LinkedIn request to connect with a personalized note. So 2 thoughts that I had about this is, one is a lot of times students really feel like they would like to find someone on LinkedIn and they want to connect with them. A lot of people are hesitant to connect with people that they don't know. And also, now the connection doesn't really do anything for you unless you actually have some sort of interaction with the person. So I would wait on the LinkedIn request. And the other thing is LinkedIn will offer you the option and to just say, I'd like to connect with you. I do think it's really nice to offer a personalized note. It was really nice meeting with you. I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn. If they give you other contacts for informational interviews, definitely you want to reach out to them quickly and let them know how you got that connection. So maintaining the relationship. Building relationships takes time and it takes effort. So don't rush it or put too much pressure on it, right? People are busy and you really want to sort of, not ask for more time than people have. If the professional has been and will be helpful to you in your career, stay in touch with them. But not everyone do you really need to stay in touch with, right? You can maybe have a conversation with someone and then over time you realize what they're doing is not what you want to do. So you can stay connected to them on LinkedIn, but you don't really have to continue to maintain the relationship, because you really just have to look at a successful interaction for networking is one in which you've learned something you didn't know before. You could have learned, I want no parts of that field whatsoever. But that's okay because you still learned something, still time well spent. Use LinkedIn or other types of social media to stay in touch. So again, the more that you interact with LinkedIn, the more the algorithm understands what it is that's interesting to you. You can post articles that you think might be interesting. If they post an article or make a comment, you can like them. Do you notice that they got a promotion? Do you notice that they've switched roles? Is there something that you can interact with that you're seeing through LinkedIn? Were they featured in some sort of article? Did they publish a paper that you could comment on? So in terms of maintaining the relationship, find other opportunities to see that person again. Using the holidays, use the New Year's to reconnect, remembering those personal details, asking how they're doing. Again, if you're keeping track of things in a spreadsheet, if you're keeping track of things in a networking app, you can really do a pretty good job of sort of making yourself a little reminder to follow up with someone. Send an update when you have news to share. If you publish a paper, if you get a leadership role in a student organization, if you have news to share, let them know. Ask them a follow-up question. Ask them for additional advice, right? Share an article that reminds you of the conversation. Oh, you mentioned when we were having this conversation that you were really interested in this. I just read this. I thought you might like to see it. If they give you any additional advice, if there's any part of the conversation that's becoming relevant, be sure to say thank you. People always, I think, appreciate some gratitude. This is our informational interview guide for graduate students and postdocs. And again, we're going to share some links on Joseph shared the box link, and we'll have some at the end where you can find these. This is a great guide that's really going to walk you through all the steps that we talked about today. And it even has a sample email that you are welcome to take in terms of how you might follow up with someone that you're trying to reach out to for informational interviewing.